out tonight. We have a really great panel discussion for you guys between some really talented people. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick intro of the two companies that are throwing this shindig. So my name's Jared Selko. I'm a developer as well as the office lead for the Austin office for Moove It, one of the two companies throwing this. I'm also actually an alumni of Austin Coding Academy, so shout out to those guys for making a great school. Moove It's a software consultancy that designs, develops, and deploys all manner of application from web apps to mobile apps to IoT infrastructure. Our portfolio runs the gamut from small startups that need an MVP in 3 months to enterprise clients with multi-year contracts like Disney and MLB, if you know who either of those are. We're actively looking for mid-level and senior developers with full stack experience who are comfortable working across a wide array of technologies because our clients are also very diverse. So if you guys are looking for a non-contract full-time job with full benefits, including work from home, give me or any of the people wearing these shirts a shout. We'll also be available after the event for talking. So with all that said, I'll pass the mic off to Dan, our co-host.
Hey everybody, my name is Dan Cumming. I'm the Director of Placement and Partnerships at Austin Coding Academy. We are a part-time coding school that holds classes here at Capital Factory and at the Highland location. So it's evening classes. All of our students hold a full-time job while they learn coding over a 10-month period. Our graduates work at companies like IBM, Dell, Facebook, Docker. You might have heard of Moove It, just mentioned just now. That's him. But we also build custom curriculum for companies. So if you are a developer and your team has some skill gaps, we can build a custom curriculum and deliver that to your company. So I will be available afterwards as well. So if you want to talk about taking classes or any kind of custom training, let me know. But thank you so much for Jared putting this together and the panelists for being here. And now they're going to introduce themselves. So Richard, you got it.
Hello. Hey, I'm Richard Navarrete. Thanks a bunch for having me. I work for Own Local, which is a company that helps newspapers with mostly with putting their ads online. When I first thought about going to work there, I thought, well, newspapers, I'm not sure how much of a future that is, but there is still $18 billion being made in that industry, and of the 18 major companies that are platforms and major media companies in the U.S., we work with about 15. So anyway, that's been interesting. I'll pass it off.
Hey everybody, I'm Zachary. I work with Austin Fraser. I'm one of the team leads over the development at Austin Fraser, and we are technical recruiters, which is taboo and people don't like that, but the way we differentiate is each one of us focuses on our own very specific, we call it vertical markets, but it's your own neighborhood of the IT industry. So my specialty was open source, specifically Ruby on Rails, which I've already seen a couple name tags that people do in Ruby, which is the coolest open source language. But anyway, for example, only does QA. Anthony only does machine learning and data science. We only focus on Austin, so our candidates are here, our clients are here. I work with 150 hiring parties here in Austin that we've built up over the past few years, I guess 4 years specifically, and myself have placed and helped over 250 engineers and developers around Austin. So we have an 80% repeat business rate with the companies that do choose to use our services, and we don't have the reputation of being sleazy and kind of scummy. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but recruiters do typically get a bad name here in town. But come find me. Happy to talk to anybody and everybody about how I move forward.
My name is Jennifer Nelson, call me Jen. I used to work for a company called Rocket Software, so the bio is a little outdated. I've just switched companies and I'm now with Bizarre Voice. I can attest that we've used Zach and Austin Fraser to place candidates at Austin, Texas. I think we hired 6 or 7 last year. And we learned about Dan through one of our little young whippersnappers who had some buddies that were developing here and learning here. And so we've developed a relationship with Austin Coding Academy to do annual hackathons, if you guys know what a hackathon is. My focus is in engineering And we like to hire young engineers, old engineers, everything in between, anybody who is passionate about innovating and creating, because that's really what you do every day. So I'm happy to talk to you about either Rocket Software or Bazaar Voice in the Q&A.
Hi, I'm Terrence. Actually, I've worked with Zach before, Austin Frazier. They kind of drug me out of Seattle, although I was more than willing to go. I worked at a company called Sync One Systems. Currently, we make fintech, banking software for credit unions, for loan originations and so forth. The interesting part about it is, though, it's middleware. So in my current role, I do a lot of integration support, also kind of manage the CI/CD pipeline, and I built out the QA automation process and the process for the QA. So, going through verifying commits, double checking everything, make sure everything works as expected, that kind of thing. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years off and on, kind of doing certain pieces that I wanted to learn about and everything else. I've worked at Amazon, T-Mobile, AT&T, kind of varied. So for me, it's all about, I like to understand things. And so I will pick a field, pick a job, and learn it as much as I can and see how it fits with everything else I understand. So I'm very much about interoperability. So I guess I consider myself an SDET, although I'm kind of branching off into DevOps as well a little bit. So it keeps me busy. You're always learning something.
Awesome. So with all the intros out of the way, let's just dive in. So one of the things, whenever we were thinking about the questions to ask, one of the things that kept coming up was, how do people keep up with all of the change that we have to contend with as developers, particularly in the web development industry, but in the technology industry writ large? So the question is, do you have resources that you use to stay abreast of all these changes?
Since I'm holding the mic, I'll go first. Always. I think one of the secrets, though, is if you pick a job that's a little challenging for you, you're going to have to learn. That's just the nature of it all. But personally, I like to set timelines in my head as to, how long it's going to take for me to learn the job, how long before, I can improve it, and then how long before I'm looking for my next challenge. But of course, YouTube is everywhere. There's a site I use called LeanPub, which is basically, it's a very lean model for books. They're not even completed yet, but you get a lot of cutting edge tech, and they have a sliding scale. So, the author's still writing it, but you can kind of keep up with what they're doing as the technology grows, and they're learning more about it. They're writing more about it. You can just download that new copy and keep going. So I'd say primarily for me, other than Google, of course, I use YouTube and LeanPub definitely when I just need to sit down and just kind of study over things ago.
So there was somebody standing in the back. I don't know if he got a seat. Okay, good, good. So Zach can probably attest to this, but what I recommend is read. Read blogs, read articles, read magazines to talk about where things are going in the industry, where trends are going in the industry. And then you want to see reality. Go look at job descriptions in your city or in another city that you want to move to. Look at the tech that people are looking for the hard skills you have to have, and you'll see what's a fringe case, what's fringe technology, but what's core technology that lots of people are asking for and lots of people are looking for. You'll be able to see whether or not your skills match or if there's a gap. And if there's a gap, Austin Coding Academy can probably help you fill that. But that's how I stay abreast on technology, is reading articles, reading those authors whose blogs I enjoy, who kind of cut through the BS and just get to the core of what the tech really is, instead of fluffing it up with marketing jargon. And then I go out and I look at job descriptions for the engineers to see which companies are really doing what with that technology. And if I just don't see the skills out there, then I know it's probably coming, maybe someday soon, but not something in the immediate future that we know our competitors are actually using.
One thing, and you're absolutely right, there's so many resources that are available out there. One thing that I've found immensely helpful and is huge in Austin is the meetup community. And I'm not sure, I can only speak for Austin as far as my experience, but seeing how rampant and popular and excitable the meetup community is here in Austin, I don't know how many times I've been up here in this very room, I'm speaking to the PHP group, the Python group, the Ruby group. Again, my background being open source, but the Meetup community is how I found out about Docker 2 years ago. Never heard of it prior to. Everybody was on Vagrant, and now no one's on Vagrant. I guess some people still are, but Docker's the way to go. And it's kind of crazy to see how much I've learned, how many new techs I've found out about, and kind of become excited about through the community, which is really cool.
Yeah, I guess what I would add is just a couple of resources for me are I look at TechCrunch a lot because a lot of companies there are there's a good description about what their tech is and kind of what they're looking for. And for me, that helps me sort of look at the frameworks and the languages that people are looking for, so that keeps me up to date there. In terms of resources for, I don't know if this is the one with staying sharp on like dev methods and that kind of thing, but I also look a lot at Stack Overflow. I mean, it's been around forever, and I've gone there and contributed some, so I guess there are certain groups there that I keep up with, and yeah, that's one of the things I look at.
Cool. So as a developer myself, I've definitely run across plenty of situations where I've used Stack Overflow or I've read some very poorly written blog that has technical information in it, and only then find out later, that there's an entire other body of information saying don't do this at all. This is entirely wrong for this and that reason. Do you guys tend to avoid the one-off Medium posts and blog posts and only stick with reputable sources that you know have a recurring posting, or do you also use those other resources?
I think as far as my answer there, especially again, not to use open source as my crutch, but to see how many contributors you have on GitHub in particular, how many resources you can find on Stack Overflow, people that are willing and ready and excited to contribute their knowledge. I don't think anything stays constant for me particularly, but at the same time, I'm also not writing code on a daily basis, so take that with a grain of salt.
Trial and error. I mean, sometimes because you may have a niche case where that one solution that isn't as popular for everyone else will work. And if you're looking at legacy software and everything else, of course, you've got the body of approvals and everything else where people are like, oh, they're certified, we tested this and that. But if you're using cutting edge technology, that person who's only had like 2 comments might be onto something you haven't thought about. So I keep an open mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of those new technologies, is there any emerging technology, framework, language that you're particularly excited about?
I'm a Python guy. Some people like Ruby, but the interesting thing for me being an SStat is I like being an SStat because I enjoy the concept of reverse engineering something someone else has already built. And you have to be full stack. You have to understand it because you need to be able to call them on it if they've made a mistake. I don't know if you've ever argued with a developer whose code is perfect, but you've got to be able to back it up. But for me, Python is leading the way with a lot of the technologies, the machine learning, and just the idea of model sets and data sets and how to test those and implement them and look for error correction and everything else. Because even if we're just building it out, we're going to have to figure out a way to test it. And so for me, I find that very exciting because you have to understand it, be able to test it. So for me, Python's kind of leading the way for the Internet of Things, machine learning, and even just modeling a data set. So.
Yeah, I agree. Python is huge, and I won't add anything else to what you said. I mean, I certainly have been looking at machine learning and just looking at large volumes of data sets, and like Python is just like that's the leader. In addition to that, I would say that that Node and React.js have been really big, and certainly for web development. And I mean, if you want to add a React Native, app, you need to go a little bit more native in mobile. That's a good option. And then I was talking to somebody earlier, but when you hire someone that is focuses more on backend, they do Node, and then there's something you know, that you want them to look at maybe or coordinate with the front end, it's a lot easier to do because you're at the core of it, you're still looking at the same basic language, right? It's JavaScript. I guess I've been really excited about those two for the last few years, and I don't see them slowing down at all, really. Of course, I'm always hoping that Smalltalk is going to make a comeback, but it's not. I don't think it's going to.
Awesome.
Thank you for that, those laps.
As a Node developer, I'm very happy to hear that Node is on your list. So you guys mentioned that you definitely read a lot to stay sharp. Is there anything else that you do to stay current and make sure that you're not sort of stagnating? Because I know that I've talked with a surprising number of senior developers who come up and say, I'm willing to work as a mid-level or even a junior because I've been in the same stack for 15 or 20 years, and I now need to make a change, and I haven't been able to for a decade. So I'm willing to do anything to get out of it. And so it seems to me like that should be something that everyone tries to actively avoid in their career, but sometimes you really can't. If your job has a single stack and a narrow technology, then either you're going to change jobs or you're going to have to find something outside of it to supplement. So do you guys do anything to supplement?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you work for an agency, there may be, or even in just some companies, there may be the opportunity to work for a new client of the agency and get exposed to some new frameworks and libraries and languages. And that may be a good opportunity to sort of move without like starting as a you know, a Node developer when all you've been doing is PHP and like starting at the bottom, right? You want to be able to branch into something with the safety of the same company and maybe some resources there. I guess the other thing would be to try and do some projects, you know, on the side that you're interested in. For me, as a VP of engineering, I've always tried to create proofs of concept myself, from time to time, like there are different parts of my job that pull me into like talking about finance or focusing on hiring or other things besides the tech. But I really have to try and stay involved in the development, not just like trying to understand all the work that's happening, but if there's some new feature that's happening, then even though the guys that I'm working with are like much better at architecting these solutions because they're more current on these because they just simply work in them every day. If I go through and whiteboard some of these solutions with them, I can ask questions and learn more about that. And then if I can even like work on some part of it or try to do the proof of concept myself, then I wind up learning a lot and I go back to all my resources and you know, that makes me stay a little sharper.
I think that's a really solid point in that I don't know how many times we've worked with development managers, engineering managers, and I realize that may be a little bit more advanced than where a lot of us are in this room. But they come to us, Austin Fraser, and they say, hey, can you help me track down my next job? Either I'm not happy where I'm at or I've been laid off, whatever it is. And our first question has to be, how often are you in the code base? And their answer is, oh, well, I do code reviews and I'm not coding on a daily basis. They're not getting their hands dirty. And if any industry, at least that I can think of, and I guess I'm a little biased to the IT industry, but if there's any industry that you have to stay current in, it's this one. And the first case study that comes to mind is the Angular experience. So when I started in IT 5 years ago, Angular wasn't even on the scene. 4 years ago, Angular came out, Angular 1, and it was the hotness. Everybody wanted Angular. And then 6 months later, we went to Angular 2. And then all of a sudden, we skipped Angular 3, we went straight to Angular 4, or it's either 3 or 4, one of the other. And 6 months later, we went straight to Angular 5. And now it's, if you don't know React, no offense against Angular, it's still around, but it's all React. You turn around, it's React, 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 React. Nobody really cares about Angular. And again, you do see it, but these things change so swiftly, especially in IT, that if you don't stay abreast of current technology and you don't care to keep up, I can't think of another place that you would stagnate more quickly than IT.
I'm actually going to piggyback a little bit on what Zach said. So as a developer, if you're in a company where you're feeling like the tech stack is stagnant or that you want to grow your skills, offer up some ideas for some new technology. Take a look at the code base that you're working in. How hard would it be to rewrite it in something current? Could you streamline the architecture or improve performance efficiencies if you rewrote it in a modern language? So it's not usually about leaving your company. It's usually about seeing how you can help your company win by offering up solutions and suggestions. So when you do that, management goes, oh man, he's alert, he is really astute, or she's alert, she's paying attention. And that puts you on their radar so that if you are coming forward with ideas about how to improve something or something new that you can do, even if your idea is shot down, keep coming back, because your management's going to realize that you're not asleep at the wheel, that you really are paying attention to the industry, that you're paying attention to the code base, and that you care. And I think that's also going to pay back in spades.
She stole part of mine. I'm going to have to paraphrase it. No, seriously though, kind of piggybacking on what she said, find a problem. There's always problems, legacy code, something like that. Find a problem, make sure you understand it, and look at how you can solve it. I mean, this is programming. There's multiple platforms, multiple software, multiple languages. Like, there's so many solutions. Find one that works, do the dirty work, do it, prove that it works, and show them. I'm telling you, as a hiring manager, if you come to me with a solution that I don't have time to fix, but it fixes the problem, I'm like, let's try it. Let's see what you can do. I'm not gonna be like, no, I don't want that problem fixed right now. Not gonna do it. But yeah, make sure you understand the nature of it. If you come to me with just a new tech because it's flashy and cool, because React is popular right now, I'm like, well, okay, so in a year, is that still gonna be popular? Right. Do we know? You know, what are the costs? How much is it going to take for us to rewrite it? How long is it going to be sustainable? How long, you know, before we have to move on to something else? And if you're the only person that knows it, that means you're going to be fixing all of it. So, you know, make sure it's something that everyone else can pick up and everything else and has value. You don't want to be the only person that knows it. Because I'll see that with automation, where someone will come in and write an automation framework and that person leaves. So they just stop maintaining the automation support. It's just sitting out there, you know. So find a problem. Make sure you understand it and pitch an idea. You just got to be willing to do the dirty work. If you do that, I promise you, they will recognize you.
Agreed.
So moving on from the more technical questions, let's move to some hiring discussions. So what do you guys look for when hiring a developer? Or to be more specific, is there overlap in what you look for in junior, mid-level, and senior developers?
So one thing that, especially from a recruitment standpoint, is similarities between junior, mid-level, and senior engineers and developers. One thing that always stays constant is their tenure from position to position. Don't get me wrong, young guns love to go and take 6-month contracts. Why not? Get paid buku bucks per hour, take a month off, go back and do it again for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it is. But when we're talking about permanent positions, long-term tenure, it's really, really, really difficult to take someone that's had 6 jobs in 5 years and get them a sweet job that they plan on sticking around for 2 or 3 years. In Austin right now, and I'm hesitant to even say this given my company, but we're typically seeing that the average tenure in positions is 18 to 36 months. 36 months on a really good note from an engineer staying at one company to the next. So the longer that you can stay, if I find someone that's been at the same company 7 years, they will immediately be top 5% when it comes to reviewing resumes in their next organization. One thing to consider is when you apply to a job, whenever it is, whenever you are kind of in your career life cycle, is especially in a competitive candidate-driven market like Austin, you're not one of 10 or 15 people that have applied to that job. There's people all over the world that have applied to that job in downtown Austin or in the domain or wherever it may be. What makes you stand out? Whether that be your skill set, maybe that could be your education, maybe that could be your tenure in your last position or your tech stack. But there are the constants of I'm loyal, I'm dedicated, I'm eager to learn, which is always big, especially for kind of an executive summary or a summary letter for a resume, that will always stand out whenever internal recruitment or an engineering manager reviews your resume.
I totally agree with all of that. I would say that there are a lot of different things that I wind up thinking about when I'm interviewing people, and certainly the method that I've used is I'll get to in a second. But at its core, it's really three things for me. It's do I think you can do the job? Are you likely to do the job? And are you a good culture fit? And the other things that I implement, sort of help me find those answers. But I mean, when I think about like the three most important things for me, those are it. And obviously the part of the interview that's like where we're asking questions and trying to figure out like, can this person, like, what do they know? That's obviously the first part of it, like, can they do the job? The second one's a little tricky, like, are they likely to do the job? Because like everyone's putting their best foot forward, right? They're all like showing everything that they've done, but that one's like a little bit more of a gut feel. And I definitely involve the rest of the team for that, and we try to sort of figure out that piece. And then the last one, of course, is the culture fit. And the last company, actually the company that I'm at right now, On Local, after they've done a few rounds of like interviews, then one part of it, can't remember if it's split into two pieces or not, but it's a social like culture fit. So they come and have lunch with us, and and like multiple people talk to them and that kind of thing. But if I have time, I'll talk quickly about sort of the method that I've been using. A couple of companies ago, I worked at, do I have time? Okay. Worked at Frog Design. I was the global director of IT there, and aside from the applications and sort of all the delivery in software, I was also in charge of desktop applications and infrastructure and network. And for desktop, like hiring desktop people in our studios, it's kind of difficult, right? Because and we always tried to hire people from Apple, like the Genius Bar, because those guys, we mostly had Apples too. But so that helped. But and it got actually at some point, like when I would go into the Apple store, they would see me come and they'd be like, oh, "So who do you want now?" But what we started to do was we started to set up computers for them, and I would have the guys break 3 different laptops in very specific ways. I don't mean physically. I mean, I would, this one had a very specific problem. Like the user would come and we'd say like, here's the description of this one. Like basically a designer is trying to launch Photoshop and it gets to this screen and it dies. Like, and they can see it happen because it's not like theoretical, right? It's actually like, here's the computer, fix it. And we would watch them and we would have them talk through how they are going to fix the problem. So it's not just like them trying different things. It's like they are actually like talking through like, okay, well, I'm going to look at the fonts, or I'm going to do this. And I do the same thing with engineering, with that kind of thing, because with all the hiring that I've seen and that I've done myself, we typically fall into this fallacy of like, can I stress this guy into asking him something very specific about this language that, like, if he doesn't know, then like, oh, okay, so this guy obviously doesn't know his stuff because, or databases, like he didn't know what a voice cod third normal form was, so like, he's out. And like that's like, it's just such an awkward and difficult thing to like stress people on very specific things in like what you think they should know. It's much better to, and not just to whiteboard a problem and like and go through that, but we set up an exercise basically from the beginning. And if they're interested in the job and they're interested in us, then we point them at this exercise, and it's like there's a back end one and there's a front end one. And they will, if it's the front end, then they create basically a thin front end that is like, should take like a couple of hours to do, and we provide the API, and it should do some basic things. And from that, it's great because we learn that like, did they cover all the things we asked them to? Yes, that's wonderful. But when they were, like, what else did we notice that they did? Like, for instance, on the back end, instead of just creating the API, did they set up some basic tests? Did they do authentication? When they set up the API path, did they do header-based versioning, right? and like some things that are important for the future. And if they do some of these extra things, like that's great because it shows that they're thinking through some of these problems and they're going to provide a little bit more. And that really shouldn't take that much time. But when they do that, then we'll take a look at it. They've invested their own time, so they have a little bit of skin in this. And then we also spend time in this, and then we bring them in. And we have somebody work with them one-on-one because, like, typically in a development group, like, you work with other people a lot. Like, I remember days long ago where it's like one guy would be in this dark room and like nobody talks to that guy and he puts out like fantastic work. That really doesn't happen anymore. Like, you have to collaborate. And so that's what this part is about. They work with them. They have them extend, what they did. So it sort of proves that they did the work. And then the third part of that is that they do a presentation to the rest of the team, and they get to ask them questions about the choices that they made and that kind of thing. So that's good because whenever you hire a developer, you want them to find things to solve, and they bring it to the group, right? I mean, speaking may not be like a strong tenet of being a developer, but like you have to be able to communicate to your team like problems and the choices that you made. So anyway, sorry for that long thing, but that's kind of our process.
Something else to add in there that might be helpful. So Zach talked about your resume might be one of 50 or it might be one of 80 or it might be one of 100. So here's a tip to keep in mind. When you know darn good and well you have the skills for a role and you want to make yourself stand out, rewrite your resume. I'm not saying bullshit on it because hiring managers will smell that. Keep it real, right? It's still your skills, but you word it to more closely match that job description, and suddenly that hiring manager goes, ooh, here's a guy who looks like he'll fit right in. And then you have the opportunity to talk through, well, I don't have that exact skill, but I've got that language, and that language is a scripting language, just like your language, and so I can learn that. And so by giving yourself the opportunity to get your foot in the door, now you can sell yourself. But I highly recommend that you rewrite your resume. So if you're going to work with Zach at Austin Fraser to get your foot in the door, let him know that's what you're doing. The job description might be really overt on some things, might be a little bit more cryptic on other pieces of technology. That's okay. For the stuff that you can't figure out what they're really saying, just write what you can to showcase yourself, but rewrite your resume. I've done it. It works.
Sorry. They've covered a lot of really great things. For me, I mean, I'm always the curveball. You go through the normal hiring practices, dev, and then we bring in somebody from QA. Because if you only code for a happy path, I'm not a fan. I'm going to ask you questions. What about this? What about that? But for me, I take things to the basics. If you don't understand your fundamentals, if you fell asleep when they were talking about collections or decision workflows or conditionals, I have a problem with that. Because if you don't understand the problem, you can't write a good solution. And you're just going to introduce more bugs, more issues later on down the line. I can take a look at your resume, and then I'm going to ask you certain very specific questions that are just base fundamentals. And if you can't pass those, you're a no but for me. So flashy words on the resume will not get you hired. That's one thing I like about Austin Coding Academy. They will focus on the fundamentals, because if you start with a good base, you can learn everything else. But if you don't understand the fundamentals of development, computer science, why we do things a certain way, you just won't grow. You're going to hit a point where either you're going to veer off and get lost, or you're going to become stagnant, or the technology is going to leave you behind. So for me, learn your fundamentals and just be prepared for just base questions, because that's normally how it starts. If you look at every object-oriented programming language, there's a certain model you have to fit in order to qualify. So you need to think about, what's similar between Java, C#, C++, what's common between like JavaScript and like any other runtime language like Python or even Ruby. If you can explain why they're similar and what the difference is, I'm sold, because it means you truly understand. And even if you know one language but don't know the other, but if you understand 80% of the concepts, the rest of it's just syntax. So I just want to put that out there. Don't be discouraged because you see a job interview or a job posting with a language you don't understand. But if you really understand the fundamentals of C#, you can learn Java if you really want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So to sort of dig into a piece of that entire set of answers that y'all had, is there a delineation that you guys make between a junior, a mid-level, and a senior? Like, how do you distinguish between those roles? Is there anything that you see when someone applies as a mid-level that makes you say, you're just not, because you either don't have the experience or your portfolio's, too small or anything like that?
I'll keep it short since I'm sure Zach has a lot of experience with this. If you're coming in junior and you're humble, generally, I mean, there's always an age gap as far as experience goes, excuse me. So generally 2 years and under, your portfolio, you've got the basics, fundamentals, just kind of very simple applications. It tells me, okay, you're learning. And then if I start seeing integrations, multiple pieces, right around mid. But I think seniors, when you have the answers, like your body of work, your resume, like you come in, we won't even hand you your computer. We're just going to ask you questions to see what you understand. I'd say anywhere from junior to mid, really that's the gray area to see how much you're actually really learning. But if you made it to senior level, we shouldn't even have to have you touch a computer, maybe whiteboard some things. We should be able to ask you some questions and you can fire them off. If you can't, maybe you're not as senior as you think you are.
Just real quick. Sorry, I'll buy you a beer. So when we're looking for a junior developer, it's usually for a reason. We're looking for some fresh blood, some fresh thought. We're looking for somebody with fresh perspective. We're looking for somebody who can take the product into the future, and that means in some amount of time you'll own it. If we're looking for somebody more senior, then that's because we're looking for the deep expertise, the domain knowledge. We're looking for somebody to really dig into this technology to see how we can morph it to take it into the future. A mid-engineer is a good one. We don't usually hire mid-tier engineers only because, excuse me, only because we have an inordinate amount, you know what I mean? And I'm not even drinking, y'all. I'm stone cold sober. An inordinate amount of mid-level engineers right now. But the problem is they attrit fairly rapidly. Junior level engineers actually don't, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because they lack confidence in themselves to think that they can move, or if they're just really digging what they're doing and they stay. Senior level engineers and junior engineers is the blend that we have at Rocket Software right now.
So like Terrence said, I could go on for days about this, and I don't think my answer is going to be the most popular answer, but my answer is very, very honest. One thing we notice when it comes to someone's seniority or level of experience is 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, is directly correlated to their self-awareness, which is really, really deep to kind of to process. No one wants to be a junior. No one wants to be a junior forever. But if you're a junior and you're applying for a senior level role, you were done before you started. If you're a junior and you're applying for a mid-level role, that shows some ambition. It's okay, I get it. That's okay, let's see what you got. Maybe we'll talk to you. But being very, very self-aware of where you are, when you are, and what your skill gaps are, which is the hardest part to assess, that comes with brutal honesty. And that comes with talking to your manager, talking to your line manager, talking to your team lead, talking to your peers. It's almost what we call a 360 review. What am I good at? Where could I use some improvement? To piggyback on Jen's answer, the mid-level candidate is the hottest candidate. It's just what it is. They are reasonably priced in the grand scheme of things. Sometimes you got a 15-year engineer, looks awesome on paper, real fun, but it's almost you can't teach an old dog new tricks. When you've got that 3 to 6, 7-year experienced person that is excitable, encourageable, adaptable, moldable, someone that we can train up if need be, that's the happiest place to hire, which is cool. And to further piggyback, when you've got that junior, you're 1 year, maybe they're very green, they've never held a real job, but they can come in and they're happy to fill support tickets, which no one wants to do, but it gives you experience. When they can come in and they're happy to stick around for 2, 3 years. They work on the church's youth group website for free, and it took 40 hours and it sucked. But I did it, and I can put it on my GitHub and it's awesome, and I can show my manager, I can get feedback. It's little things like this, that these experiential things are so, so, so valuable, whether or not you made $80 an hour on it or not. You know what I mean? It's really, really funny, but I guess my answer in summation to not continue on is the self-awareness piece. If you're a 2-year candidate, you're applying for a job that's asked for 3 years of experience, that's totally cool. There is some flexibility there, but be prepared to bring it. Show them what you know, and don't be afraid to address the areas that you don't. That's okay. I can learn. One thing to piggyback on your last answer, sorry, is it blew my mind the first time I saw a candidate be hired because they were a better culture match than they were a technical match. And I thought, why the heck wouldn't Whole Foods hire this candidate that's better for the job, and I know it, and I'm not even technical, but they hired someone that's a better technical match, or excuse me, a better cultural match. And in hindsight, it's always 2020. That cultural match, we can train up in 3 weeks on the technical stuff. We can never change that person's cultural match, which I thought was really, really deep. And you wonder, well, how can I get to know someone's culture in a company? There's Glassdoor, which is kind of the obvious answer, but you've also got LinkedIn. And 9 out of 10 people in this room have LinkedIn, and it's such a powerful tool that you can literally reach anyone in this room right now just by finding them. You could find Jared and say, hey, I'm interviewing with Conrado, and I don't know what to do. I think I got the technical skills, but I don't know what you guys are like. Jared will tell you, yo, we go bowling every Thursday night. It's an awesome place to work. You just gotta be chill. You just gotta be communicative. You gotta know and acknowledge when you don't know something. And you can go into that interview like a rock star. Just like that, because you had the nerve and the tenacity and the appreciative nature to ask somebody that knows.
Yeah, you cared and you asked questions. I mean, so I always appreciate it when somebody comes in and they've done some homework, or if they've reached out to somebody at the company and like have asked questions, that's awesome. And I 100% agree with like all of your answers. I think that if I can just add a little bit, it is a scale of are you willing, like how eager are you to learn? And then as you get higher up, how eager are you to teach? Because that is what keeps that cycle going, bringing new people in that are eager to learn and are eager to contribute and are not afraid of doing some dirty work. Because like in development, there's always that that kind of stuff that you have to just go and clean up. And I mean, nobody wants to do it, and maybe you can pick names out of a hat, but sometimes you learn some things from doing that kind of thing, and you, it's good not to skip it. But definitely as a senior developer, I always look for, how much time have you spent mentoring people, like not just at the company, but maybe outside? What have you contributed to? Like, and I always go look at like GitHub or, Stack Overflow and see if they've contributed to the community there. Maybe some plugins or just comments at the least, because like the more that you learn, it's all coming from a great place if you turn around and you contribute that back to your community, whether it's your own team or like, people on somebody else's team, or like just the greater community.
Awesome. So a few of y'all mentioned number of years as a way to measure seniority. Do you guys think that it's possible to be a mid-level with no professional experience, or a senior with only 5 years of experience? Yeah? Yes to both? Interesting.
I would definitely say that's possible. I mean, anything's possible, but once again, you're putting in the time somewhere, whether you're doing it for free at home, studying and reading, writing your own projects, or if you just have an uncanny sense. Like, when I look at our current team at Sync 1, we joke that we have like mid-level people, but when I talk to these candidates, some of them are young, so like they started coding when they were in middle school, and then they went in and got a 4-year degree. So they've collectively got like 9 years experience here before they were even working, like 6 years here, that kind of thing. So anything's possible, but a lot of times in that case, it's just somebody who's very hungry and ambitious and had the ability to focus on that. Maybe they didn't have to work, or they were still young, or someone introduced them to it early. So, I mean, it happens, but I mean, the breadth of knowledge, with programming, the internet, networking is just so huge. Like, you can talk to people 50 years in that are still learning something every day. I mean, people on podcasts will tell you, oh man, every day I wake up, I learn something new, you know, so it's possible, but I wouldn't say it's probable.
In my experience, it's not just the number of years you have in the role, it's actually the value that you're bringing to the table. Never let anybody doubt the value that you bring to the table. Always bring your game face, be hungry, offer up solutions to problems, work a little late, come in a little early. A lot of it's optics as well. But it's what you're adding to the table and the value that you're bringing to the company that also determines seniority. We've promoted some very junior talent very quickly because of the promise that they showed, and it was simply because they invested themselves in a way that their peers didn't, and they rose to the top. They were starting to shine as leaders very early.
I think I do too. Those are awesome answers. And one thing is that I found very, very helpful is to take a walk in someone else's shoes. Let's say we weren't engineers, developers, recruiters. Let's say we were hot dog cookers and we were junior level hot dog cookers. Just like Jen's point, that if you were able to milk the food truck line, the 50 people, you're the best customer service, and you got to work 30 minutes early and you stayed 30 minutes late because there were some extra buns that needed toasting. Your optics, which is a good way to put it around that, is, dang, this guy really knows what he's doing. You haven't even cooked the first hot dog. But at the same time, if you can put on the perception that I'm here to win it, I'm here for the long haul, and I'm here to learn anything you will teach me, that means something.
Leadership. It's not always about how much you know, it's how you perform.
Yeah, I almost don't want to know like how many years or what position they're at, because I feel like I'll get a lot of that just from talking to them and going through the same process. You know, and if they're really you know, not even mid-level yet, and they really impress me, maybe there's something there for them to move forward. But you know,
So would it be accurate to say that even for more senior roles, the soft skills play a equally large part compared to the technical skills?
Sometimes more so.
Sometimes more so.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. That's a little surprising. I know that there's sometimes a perception that people want just rock star developers on their team, right? Like, I know that at our company, we actively discourage that mindset because people can get pretty intellectually entitled. So we try to, foster this team-based mentality. It sounds like from what you guys were saying earlier that that's now the norm, right? That's not really just how some companies do it. It's basically required that you be team-minded. So you were saying that having these like bad social, not even social skills, but rather just projecting poorly might be a very disqualifying part of performance for an applicant. Are there any other instant disqualifiers that you guys have in the application process?
I try to stay away from instant disqualifiers, of any kind. I'm just going to put them through my process, really. And I mean, there may be like the really scary thing, like they've been, like the last 3 jobs, they've only been like a few months each time. I mean, maybe there's a story there. Maybe they listed it and it's actually work for, for family. And I mean, you just never really know. I try to stay away from like just looking at something and going, this is out. Yeah.
I think one that this is very, very relevant to me. It happened 4 hours ago, which was tough. I'm working with a traffic solution management company. They're global, publicly traded. They're amazing. Happy to get anyone a job there if they want to. But we had this candidate go in for a managerial position, just 3 o'clock this afternoon. And it was really tough. He had 6 years applicable experience, 15 years as a manager of IT teams and technical teams. And the guy gets in his interview today, 4 hours ago, still very fresh. And the team starts asking him, when did things go wrong? What did you do? What if this happened? What did you do? You talked kind of negatively about this earlier. What did you do? And not in a single instance, and I couldn't believe it when I got the feedback email, I wanted to cry, but he couldn't own any of it. It was ownership, it was accountability, it was not being able to offer an alternative solution, not being able to take a step back, put yourself in someone else's shoes, and to look at the situation from a different perspective and say, what could we have done differently? What could I have done differently? And that's really deep. It's really difficult, but it's necessary. And as far as an instant disqualifier goes, I guess that's the example that comes to mind, because if this guy had said, you know what, us as a team and some of my decisions as a whole could have led to a different outcome, and now in hindsight I would have done X, Y, or Z differently, that guy would have gotten the job today, and he would have gotten his $200K salary, and he would have been happy as a clam. But instead he has to go home and say, I didn't get the job, and it's tough. It's, again, that self-reflection piece.
Authenticity is really big. We can typically tell if a candidate is inflating an accomplishment or trying to side skirt a question because they wouldn't have a positive answer otherwise. So even if you're asked about a scenario, Terrence is laughing, even if you're asked about a scenario that you really don't want to divulge information about because you're afraid that it might color you in an unfavorable light, being authentic and genuine about your culpability in a situation or what you did to save a situation helps define your character. Interviews are intimidating, and we always want to present the best foot forward, right? But nobody's perfect, and everybody's got a skeleton that if you even crack that closet door, it's going to fall out. So just be authentic, just be yourself. The resume that you present should be you. Like I said, don't BS it, because hiring managers will know, Zach will know. But authenticity, if we don't really feel like what we're seeing is the real you, you may be a great talented developer, but we won't continue the interviewing process just because we're just not feeling the genuineness.
One of the things that I've literally asked them in the middle of an interview, why are you here? I want to know why you're here. Why did you apply? Why did you get dressed up, assuming you're on lunch break from your other job? I want to know why you're there. Passion. If you can provide me legitimate answers that make sense to me, that resonate, I'm going to feel it. Because if I have to deal with an ego or someone that it's never their fault, I don't care how smart you are. I've dealt with those people. They got to go. That's not teamwork. It's very difficult to do anything with them because, you have to be all moving in one direction sometimes. They got to be able to take direction. They've got to be able to follow through. So yeah, I look for passion. I look for understanding of the situation. Like, you're walking in this company, you may or may not have this skill. Are you willing to do what it takes to be successful here? Or are you going to just kind of dilly-dally along? I might have to monitor you and babysit. So one of the things I look for is an engineer mindset, someone that's going to own it. They're going to come up with a solution, they're going to learn from their mistakes, they're going to grow, they're going to develop. So whether they're a developer, QA, anyone who can have solid problem-solving skills and actually learn and understand the situation is always a green light for me.
A lot of sense. So specific question, how do you guys feel about typos on resumes? 1 typo, 5 typo, 10 typos? Is any of those a disqualifying threshold?
No.
You know why? Until you said that.
I know we have spell check, y'all, but we're still engineers. We're focused on other stuff. So when an engineer comes in for an interview and they're not exactly wearing matching clothing, that's okay too, because it's just not the personality of an engineer. Now, typos in code, that's another thing. But when you're typing in Microsoft Word, I know it gives you spell checker. We don't worry about it. We're not that uptight, because we've probably done it too.
She's a little more forgiving than I am, because it depends on where the typo is. Like, I get that sometimes, but if it's like blaringly obvious, or if you misspell the company name, like it really depends, So it really depends on what the typo is. We've all added a little extra E sometimes, and Microsoft is fallible.
Potato with an E.
Oh, yeah, so we talking plural or singular, Yeah, it depends what you're applying for. Maybe you wrote a potato gun application. I don't know. For me, it just really kind of depends. Yeah, but attention to detail is important, especially depending on your level that you're at. Like for us, we write financial software, so precision. So one of the questions I'll ask someone coming in is like, okay, how do you handle like a parsing and conversion when you're going from like a string and you're hitting the back end, or how do you validate to make sure that it stays at the precision you want and the data type that you want? And if they have no idea and they're like, it does it for me, so attention to detail is something that's important, and it depends on what you're doing. Like if you go work for WordPress and you have typos everywhere, they might have a problem.
So the attention to detail piece is the first thing that comes to mind for me, but at the same time, I see probably between 30 and 40 resumes a day, if not more. And probably more than 50% have something spelled wrong somewhere. And what's really cool about Google Docs and their spell check is they are privy to the technical stuff for the most part, so it will identify it, but there is still stuff left and right. And if you work with me and Austin Fraser, I correct a lot of stuff on resumes, and I don't even tell you because I don't want to make you feel bad, but check it because it's there, and I swear, I bet you 60% of resumes I get has something wrong with it. It's not uncommon, but keep an eye out. Attention to detail.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more like Terrence, and I feel like it bespeaks a deeper message about like your how much you're paying attention and how, especially with the resume, like I mean, that's you on a piece of paper in your career and your education, and you're gonna send that out, and I mean, if there are typos in the comments in code, I mean, that's okay, I guess. But like, you may make a mistake, with like calling the wrong method, and like what if it gets past code review and like it causes problems? I mean, I don't know. Just attention to detail is pretty important to me.
I did want to add something because I do have a bigger pet peeve. Given we're all devs, software engineers, everything else. So resume, of course, make mistakes. I check commit messages. Like if I'm looking at your GitHub, I'm looking at your commit messages, and if they're all over the place or make no sense and you didn't even attempt, I hate that because that tells me that I'm going to have to review those and I'm going to have to deal with that. And if you can't pass on relevant information to someone else coming behind you, that's worse than a resume for me. So for me, yeah, if you put your link to your GitHub, I'm checking your commits and I'm checking your commit messages. I'm be honest.
Right. If the commit message is like did some stuff or whatever, it's like.
Yeah. Like if you're venting in your commit messages, no.
Clearly, the diverse answers here shows you're going to have a diverse opinion in the field as well. I care about the code you checked into GitHub that I'm going to go look at. That's really what I'm going to look at. Most engineers are personality donors. Now, I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm just saying most I've met are on the spectrum, right? But they're brilliant. So I really want to see what's written in GitHub. What did you actually write yourself? Because that's going to tell me how you're going to innovate and create in my shop. So if your resume is sloppily written, if you got some mismatched clothes on, which I dated a boyfriend once, I didn't realize he was colorblind, and that explained his clothes. But I'm going to be a little bit forgiving on some of the details that others might not, because what really matters to me is what's in GitHub.
Fly with her.
Yeah. I'll add one thing that I just realized that I look for, that it's if I get a hold of the code and I'm looking at exceptions, if you just have I know, if you just log the basic exception and don't dig into like the specific kind of exception, that's kind of a pet peeve for me. But we should probably stop with the pet peeves.
So several of y'all mentioned GitHub. I know that a lot of developers, if they've been working in a corporate job for several years, all of it's private. No one can see any of it. How much do you guys value, or do you even require, access to some code that they've written? Do you see it as an issue if someone's only done professional coding and hasn't had a side project in several years? And so sort of as an umbrella for that, how important do you see a portfolio website, access to side projects on a GitHub, a CS degree?
Yeah, so these are things that we encounter more often than not. No, all my code's proprietary. There's nothing I can share. I don't put anything on GitHub, whatever it may be. And one thing that we see as a common solution to that, which is frustrating, is whiteboarding. I've never, and I've literally worked with thousands of developers and engineers in Austin, actually, and I've never met a single one that said, you know what I really like to do? Whiteboard. That's just not a thing. Everyone, except for Terrence, and he's not from here. So, all right, close enough, closer than me. But one thing that's really, really funny is whiteboarding is something that you'll never escape. Lead engineers have to do it on a daily basis. I've got this really cool idea, this cool concept, turn around and scribble on the board. But at that point, no one is really judging, at least that's not how it feels, because everyone knows who you are. I trust you. I know you're good. I'm going to watch and see what you got. But when someone comes in for an interview, it's literally like an American Idol audition. And you've got Randy and Simon and Paula and whoever else, and they're standing there. It's a no from me, dog. And it's nerve-wracking for everyone. So if you have anything, a personal project that you can share, you can put on GitHub. If you have a HackerRank assessment or a Codility or whatever it may be. Another thing that's really interesting that we're seeing more and more often, instead of whiteboarding, because people should realize that it makes everyone nervous and that everyone hates it, is pair programming. Pair programming is really, really cool. Let's say we have an elevator that can handle 2,200 pounds and we have 9 people and here's their weights. How can we optimize this elevator to get to the 16th floor in this scenario? And me and Richard sit down and let's figure it out. You watch me code it and let's talk about it. So what happens is when you turn around with your back to everyone and you have to write on a whiteboard and you're so freaking out about A, your handwriting, and B, if you even understand the question, everyone's going to freak out. But when you can sit down and say, okay, well, what was this piece again? The pair programming is something that I've seen come on the scene in the past couple of years that's been really, really huge, rather than a shared repo or something public.
Yeah, I definitely want to see side projects. I think anybody that is curious and wants to try out new things is going to have something to share. I have done whiteboarding before, and I almost don't want them to solve the problem. So I'm not giving them like some complicated, like physics thing, traveling 50 miles an hour and how fast are you going to get out of target. But because I want to know like their thought process. It's always what I'm looking for. So like the computers I told you about that we set up at Frog, that there were some problems that I didn't think that they were going to solve, and a few people surprised me. But the ones that did solve it, I almost didn't learn anything from that. So when they're working through the problem, I want them to talk through it. And I have had some developers that just start whiteboarding and they go into their own little happy place and they're just keeping quiet and they're clearly working on it. I don't learn anything from that. I want to learn their thought process. Like, do they have linear thought? Are they ruling some things out? Just what's going on in their mind. I learn a lot more from that.
There are ways around it. I do like whiteboarding, but then again, I also like taking tests. I'm weird like that. And pair programming is very useful, especially for mid to senior level candidates. For me, though, I feel like if you're really learning, you're going to have to do a proof of concept sometimes. Or if you're really trying to grow in your job, like I said, you've identified a problem, you're probably going to write something to try to test it out or verify. And if they're not actually using it, that's yours. You can put that up just to say, hey, I wrote this as a solution for something. I do it. I forget sometimes. I go back and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot I wrote that. Like, I have a bunch of classes I wrote, test models and everything else for making things easier for me, like just methods and scripts and everything else that I wrote for like hitting an API, verifying the return, going through the JSON object, verifying the attributes, validating everything else. I generally like to make my job easier. And so I generally will write tools to do that, although I'll forget about them if I change jobs, change projects, it's a different application, everything else. So I generally honestly feel like, yeah, you may be getting paid to do something and it's all proprietary, but if you're only coding because they're paying you, why are you in the field? because eventually somebody will stop paying you or want to pay you less, or this really cool job is going to come up, and they don't want people who just want to cash a paycheck. They want somebody who's passionate, somebody who loves what they're doing and is always thinking that next step ahead. So for me, if you don't have anything and just because it was all proprietary, I'm like, what'd you do in your free time? You know, I'm a second generation nerd. So for me, it's like, there's always something cool you were probably doing or thinking about that you could share with us.
So we'll change gears as we enter the last 30 minutes here. So what are y'all's thoughts surrounding giving back to the community, the development community or social engagement sort of projects?
I'll go first. I'm big on it. I found it to be the most rewarding, like you were saying earlier, Richard, like as you move up and you pass back down, you know, like the information, everything else. I think I really got started on that when I was at Amazon, and they had mentoring programs where we would just hold classes where you come in and talk to the senior people, like, you know, people that have written protocols for the internet and everything else, and can give you answers to things you never even considered, you know. So when I worked at Bellevue College, I started a mentoring program so people could basically take what they went to school for, got their degree in, and actually apply it. You know, actual projects and everything else so they can build their portfolio and resume. So honestly, I think it makes all those stressful hours that you spend fixing problems and everything else kind of fade away, because you can make someone else's life easier by sharing, you know, in a 5-minute conversation, something that took you 6 hours to figure out, and seeing the light bulb go off in their head and everything else, and just kind of paying it forward. So I think it's huge. If you're really dedicated to this field, you want to see people come behind you to actually kind of lead the way.
So I'll give another facet to Terrence's awesome answer, because I was going to say it. But nobody exists in a vacuum. You don't live in a vacuum. You don't enjoy your weekends in a vacuum, and you don't work in a vacuum. You interact with people every day who bestow some piece of knowledge on you. You learn something new every day, no matter how small. You actually still do. It doesn't have to be an epiphany every day. And to that end, somebody taught you something that helped you get somewhere. And you should be willing to pass on some little nugget of information. Even if you don't think you're bestowing an epiphany on them, if you're sharing a little bit of information, then that's still helpful to them today than it was yesterday. And the second thing that I'll say is when you're passionate about something and it's your craft, you should own it. So that when somebody comes to you and says, will you speak on a panel? Sure, absolutely. You're going to build a network of peers. You're going to build a network of mentors. You're going to build a network of students for tomorrow. That network will come back and pay you back in spades when you help your network. So always be willing to meet new people, introduce yourself to someone, help someone, because when you need it, your network will come out for you and help you.
Yeah, so when I heard the question, I kind of thought of charitable stuff, like maybe giving money or giving computers or whatever it is. But now after hearing these two answers, I'm kind of flooded with two other ideas. And one kind of piggybacks on you, Jen, is the community involvement, which has been instrumental in my success in the IT community. The Meetup community is huge, and I see these names. Monaco Moreno runs everything Node in Austin, and he is a celebrity, and I'd put a curse word in front of that if I could, because he is the man. Josh Butts, he's the CTO at offers.com. He is a PHP celebrity, and you see these people come and they share knowledge and they share the experiences that they've had, or they share the insight they have into the community, and to see the impact that that has upon the people that they're speaking to is ridiculous. And then I think secondly would be the opportunity to share a little bit about what you know. There's nothing wrong with giving someone an opportunity or giving someone a leg up on the competition if you have an insider secret, or if you have something that may be useful for someone else to know. And when I moved to Austin in 2011 from small town North Carolina, someone told me that everyone in Austin knows everyone in Austin. And I thought, yeah, right. There's 1 million people here at the time, just shy of 1 million people. There's no way that everyone in Austin knows everyone in Austin. There's what, 60 or 70 of us sitting in this room, and I know at least 15 people in this room. I knew all 4 of these panelists and didn't even know that these 4 were going to be the panelists. In hindsight, everyone in Austin knows everyone in Austin, and any karma or good deed that you can pay forward does pay itself back, and it's creepy.
Yeah, I agree. It's a small world, and it's not just limited to Austin. I mean, like a lot of the guys that I've worked with here, they've gone on to work in California. Oh, okay. Hey, how's it going? And the first company I came to work for here, this I won't tell you what year that was. It was Deja.com. It was first DejaNews.com, and then we changed. And they had a saying that I've like always carried through, and it's share what you know, learn what you don't. And that was about Usenet, and so like helping each other like learn things. But I've tried to apply that to everything, and that's why culture is really important for me, because I want people to learn from other people and to teach other people, and just to keep that cycle going.
Instrumental in helping me become a better developer, and I've also started to pay it forward as a mentor to younger people, and it's incredibly rewarding. And I have a busy life, and taking the time to do it, you don't walk away feeling angry at yourself for, you know, it's not like playing a video game where you walk away and you go, wow, I spent 2 hours doing nothing. It's like I spent 2 hours helping someone out. It feels really good, so I can definitely attest to that. Do any of you guys have a mentor now? Are you guys mentoring now? And is there a specific story that you'd like to tell about how a mentor has impacted your career path or life?
Yes, I have been really fortunate to have a lot of people help me all in my career, even when I was working on mainframe programs, which was like, I'm really not that old, okay? I feel like I have to explain this. I was really young. I was like 16, and like COBOL was there. Okay, but I mean, all along my career, I have had people that have helped me, and their generosity is like, it's just wonderful. And like, the only thing you can think of later is to like help someone else. I've had so many different people, I can't really even think of a particular story, but they've always been there for me, and I've done my best to like give that back.
So I do mentor on a daily basis, whether that be salespeople in my organization or whether that be the very, very junior, mid-level, or senior candidates that I represent on a daily basis. But again, maybe the unpopular answer here is, as far as mentors to me, I've worked for many a sales manager, and some have been very, very terrible at their job. But in hindsight, again, I feel like maybe I've learned the most from the ones that I didn't like, or the ones that didn't like me. And it's so easy in the heat of the moment to say, oh, I hate this, I hate that person, they hate me, I hate this job. But when you can take a step back and what did I learn from this person? And sometimes you have to be long gone from that job to realize and digest and kind of sit on what it is that that person taught you. But when the going's good and everything's easy and happy-go-lucky, you're not really adapting, you're not really changing, you're not really growing, you're comfortable, and it's easy to be comfortable. But it's when you move into the space between comfort and discomfort that you change and you learn and you grow. And I look back at Gavin, and I hated Gavin, but at the same time, I learned so much. Different Gavin, no one, he's not even in Austin. But I look back at Gavin, and I realize how much I learned from that guy, that I almost have to be thankful, but I'll never admit that outside of these 4 walls.
I'll keep my answer short. Mentorship can happen in a very informal nature. You don't have to buddy up with someone and say, I declare thee my mentor. Yeah. You can really just form a mentorship type of bond with anybody who's willing to share some knowledge with you. Anybody who wants to, approach you and give you a coaching moment, what I call a coaching moment, where they're giving you a piece of advice about maybe a moment you didn't present the best of yourself, or in a moment that you did, where you can get some good constructive feedback. But mentorships can be a simple friendship. It can be a parental relationship. It can be a professional relationship with even someone not even in your chain of command, and I highly recommend you don't mentor with somebody in your chain of command. But mentorship can really be as informal as infrequent touch points and casual conversations.
Great answer. I'm going to slightly disagree with her on the chain of command. But for me, currently, I mean, I've had mentors in the past from the technical aspect. One, he's most unassuming guy. He never went to school. He just learned on his own. And they ended up asking him to teach a class on robotics using Python and everything else because he just, oh, it's fun. And he was our DevOps guy, so he kind of branched me down that path. I'd say currently my two mentors on the technical aspect are my director slash architect. Like he knows, he just knows. And he's very rarely wrong, and he's aware of it, but every now and then you catch him on one, he's humble about it. And then my CFO, CDO, he's been a good example on crisis management, like leadership on how to deal with things and how to get things proactively done when everyone's like scrambling and, there's a fire drill and he's cool, calm, and collected, just sitting up there. Well, why don't we do this? Let's just do this. Don't worry about it. And then if something goes wrong, he'll fall on that sword. Like he protects his people and he stands up for them. And, seeing that firsthand, it's not often you have that type of management, at least not in my experience. So learning and absorbing from them, it pushes me to be better and work harder, and I fill in the gaps, where things are missing. But as far as being a mentor, if you come on my team, I'm going to ask you basically two different things, like what do you want to know and where do you see yourself? So if you want to learn a specific technology, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm going to give you a chance to break down that path, the first opportunity, because I want you to be excited by work. There's going to be some ugly things I'm going to ask you to do that I'm glad I don't have to do it. That's the benefit of seniority. But when things come up that is an opportunity that you're passionate about, go forth, young man. Go forth, But also, I'm like, where do you see yourself? I'm always trying to train my replacement. I'm always trying to have someone who can step up and fill that void and vacancy so that I can move up, so I don't have to manage the day-to-day everything. So if someone's on my team, I'm going to keep pushing them. I'm just going to keep pushing them, and it gets to the point where they should know without me asking. That's my goal, is that if you join my team, I want you to know what needs to be done without me having to ask. I can just be like, what's the status? And they're like, boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, perfect. You made my job easier. You make me look good.
I love that answer. So we've got 10 or 15 minutes left. Does anyone, by a raise of hand, have questions that they'd like to ask the panel? Got 2, 3? Okay, cool. So we'll just do a few more here, and then I'll field it out to you guys. So let me check the time real quick. All right, we got 10 minutes, 11 minutes. So what is one piece of advice you would give yourself that you wish you knew starting out?
Wow, that's introspective. I don't know if I'm ready for the mic yet. Hang on.
I would honestly say that those who want to will. No matter what the obstacles are, it's never going to be easy. This is an ever-changing field. It's never going to be straightforward. It's never you get this job, this job, this job. And it's so all interconnected, you never know where you're going to wind up. But if you want to do it, you will figure out a way. Every time, all the time.
All right, I got my answer. This is actually advice somebody said to me within the last year, is don't be afraid to be vulnerable. So, and he was speaking specifically to me as a woman. He didn't want me to be quiet at the table for fear of looking dumb. And I took a little bit of offense to that, and I didn't understand what he meant. He said, you knew the answer to this question that was asked of you by your chief product officer, and you sat there quiet. Now, why did you do that? And I couldn't answer. I guess I was afraid of looking dumb. And that was actually, in hindsight, a really good piece of advice, just because since then, I've been more vocal at the table. And even if I look dumb, somebody would contribute and go, well, but they would still, offer insight to the conversation that would just grow my knowledge. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Those are both awesome. Mine, I guess the theme of my comments of the evening would be that self-awareness piece, would be aware. It's something that I work on today, something that I have a long way to go on, but it's being aware of your skill gaps. It's being aware of the opportunity. It's being aware of your surroundings. It's being aware of your presence when you're with your peers and your colleagues, and some of the kind of going ons or going offs that you kind of allow yourself to present yourself. The way you carry yourself as a young professional or a middle-aged professional, it speaks volumes to those around you. And it's being aware of the decisions that you make, being aware of the opportunities that you can add value, and being aware of how you carry yourself is something that I continue to work on, and I'm nowhere near where I want to be.
I would tell myself, get into Node.js as soon as possible, because that's, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I think I would tell myself to bite off a little more than I feel like I can chew, because I have done that in the past, and it's really scary because you raise your hand and you say, I can do that and I'll have that done, and then you go home and you freak out a bit, and then you're, from all that stress, like you have to play World of Warcraft or something to like just get past it. And then you're like, your back is up against the wall and you've got to produce this work, right? You've just got to do it. And there is so much growth that happens when you do that. It is scary, and if you happen to not come through, then I would say, just have, just show your work and the what you tried to do, and don't be afraid to ask for help. But I think when I look back on my own career, the most that I grew was when I put myself in some situation that was really difficult, and I forced myself to grow out of it.
So I will now field out questions to the audience. It's a pretty small room, so if you're comfortable just projecting to the room. I believe you had a question, right?
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Tristan, and
Hey.
I am about to, should I stand?
No, you're fine, whatever.
Okay, I am actually about to start my first position as a developer.
Awesome.
That's awesome. My question, actually, you sort of answered them with your most recent answers, but I guess it's, do you have any advice or suggestions for habits or practices for someone who's going into something like really fresh and maybe feeling like a lot of imposter syndrome, or like I'm really excited for this opportunity, but also I'm like, oh my god, like how am I going to do this? I'm going to completely screw everything up, and just trying to like push myself in a positive way and make sure that I make the most of like this chance.
Yeah, I guess I would say don't be afraid of showing your enthusiasm. I mean, clearly you're enthusiastic and you're excited about this, and I have met people that try to play it cool, and it really keeps them from asking questions and from engaging a lot with what's being asked of them. If I assign something to someone, I have worked with people that are like, yeah, I got it, no problem. And I'm like, but you didn't ask me what I want you to do. And when you're able to ask a lot of questions, and some people are like, this may be a dumb question, but, and of course you're going to get there are no dumb questions. So you can just skip all that and go, look, here's my questions. Like, this is what I think you want me to deliver, and I just want to make sure that I understand, this. Here's how I'm going to approach it, and this is what maybe this person I may ask to find out more about this piece because I don't understand. But like, I would say, if somebody's mentoring you, or maybe your manager is assigning you some work, or whoever, I guess I would be really open with your approach, because they know you're new, right? And the worst thing you can do is like not communicate, not talk about like what you want to do and how you're going to approach it, because then they can't possibly help you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to build on it, I would say be hungry, dude. Be as hungry as you can be. Bite off more than you can chew. That was a great thing to say. And the scary thing about that is you're gonna mess up. You're gonna crash and burn. And that's okay because every single one of us in this room has messed up. We've all crashed and burned. No one's dumb for making a mistake. It's when you make that same mistake twice that people start talking. You know what I mean? But learn from your mistakes, grow from that, and own it. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of that opportunity. Let that enthusiasm that you've got right now show and carry over. That's awesome, and congratulations.
My advice is don't be shy. And I know that that's a really general piece of advice, but I'll break it down. Don't be shy to ask questions. That's going to show that you're alert, that you're listening, that you're paying attention, and you're hungry, like Zach said. Don't be shy to say hello to people in the morning. You know, look them in the eye. Good morning. You would be surprised at how far that's going to get your reputation in the company. They're going to go, ooh, yeah, he's not an introvert. Hey, I don't like saying hi to strangers, and so I typically don't do it, but I force myself to do it because I am an introvert. Don't be shy to fail. Don't be shy to volunteer for things you know nothing about, but you want to contribute to. I would just say don't be shy, be bold.
I'm going to summarize what they basically just said and tell you the 3 things that are going to get you ahead quicker. Own your mistakes. Never have to ask this same question more than once. So pay attention when they're telling you. And 3, do the dirty work no one else wants to do. If you want to come in, you want to wow them, own your mistakes. Never ask the same question. And do the things no one else wants to do, because then they know you're in it to win it.
I'd say you're allowed, especially if you're new and you ask a question, and then your mind is just so like, wow, I can't believe I'm working with this company, and wow, like my desk's so awesome, it has a button to like raise and lower, and like, oh my God, what did they say? That kind of shit happens. Sorry, that kind of thing happens, and you're allowed, like, hopefully it's not all the time, but you're allowed to like, I'm so sorry, I just totally missed that.
Right, but if someone's teaching you or explaining something and you're not paying attention, you're not taking notes or anything else, you got to come back. You're that new guy, FNG.
Panelists, so I won't speak for long, but I also had really bad imposter syndrome at the beginning of my first development job. Everyone has it, so be okay with it. You're not going to know everything ever, and you'll never even know 1% of everything, and that's okay. A lot of people are going to know a lot more than you do. You just have to be cool with that fact and okay with ambiguity and uncertainty. Take lots of notes.
Congrats.
Yeah, congrats. There was one other question. Yeah.
Y'all are tech leaders. So in light of a pursuit of diversity and supporting minority groups that are underrepresented, how do y'all approach that in both reflecting that in your hiring practices and also in creating an environment that's inclusive, accepting, and in a realm of appropriateness, and how do you approach that from the perspective of junior engineers for us?
So I may have a unique perspective in that question in that I have hiring parties all across town who want to, and it's their driving mission, diversify and include when they're hiring, which is amazing. And it's, if we're in a good market for that, Austin is one of the best in the country, which is amazing. We have people moving here, over 100 people per day to Austin, and vast majority of those are in tech, which is amazing. When it comes to Austin, there is no shortage of diversity and inclusion, and to see that the passion and enthusiasm that organizations put behind their hiring is really, really inspiring. I think that while it's very difficult to waltz around what's legal and what I can say and what I can promote and who I can hire, it's something that it's a beautiful place we live in that people are very, very excited to make their teams as diverse and as culturally rich, especially considering the nature of IT traditionally. It's really, really insightful, and it's really, really progressive to see the changes in perspective, to see the changes in what you can get out of a group of people when you have some different perspectives for a change.
Great question, by the way. I spent a lot of time thinking about that one. And I don't have a quota to fill, but for the same reasons as Zach, I want there to be a lot of different perspectives. And it may not be like, oh, these kind of people have this perspective, or maybe they'll bring a little more of this. It's just, I want to get as many different perspectives as possible, because that winds up making your product and your engineering and the way that you contribute to problems and you learn from each other a lot better. I've never worked for Amazon, but I know they have these principles, right? 14, 18. I like a lot of them. Okay, sorry. You're supposed to know them. Okay. There's one. Yeah, that's true. There's one I like a lot, and that's that people are encouraged to have different views on things, especially like, let's say there's some approach to a problem or some architectural approach or something, you know, and it's good to have like everybody in that room go through and like try to figure out this problem, and people are encouraged to try and propose a solution, and then other people are going to like maybe shoot holes in it, because if it stands after this, it's worth it. You know, it will make it, and it's good because we weren't just like afraid to push that and like socially awkward to like ask questions and like try to break it, and then once you've decided on a solution and you move forward as a group, and that's it. Like everybody gets behind that, because we've tried to break that thing down, and now we're moving together as a group. And to do that takes, I believe, a lot of different perspectives, and you get that with diversity, however you want to call that. If you happen to have a group in South America or wherever, and you're looking at that group and what makes that up, what you may be thinking about the minority or the diversity, that is just by adding one other person, like maybe somebody in the US, that changes that, because they're no longer like, they're the minority now. So anyway, that's sort of a tangent, but great question. My point is like the better diversity gives you, the more diversity you have, the better perspectives you have.
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'll be honest with you. You're going to encounter it. There are certain companies that have embraced it. In reality, it starts with leadership. You're going to find a lot of old school companies that are looking for someone who fits the culture fit, which skews predominantly white, male, or Asian, a certain age group, and everything else, whether it be age discrimination, sex, ethnicity, or anything else. You're going to encounter it. It really starts with leadership and the message they want to send. So personally, I've been in many a meeting where I was the only person of color in that room. And it happens all the time. But what I try to do is someone who can actually enact change or affect a hiring decision. I like to keep the doors open. I like to make them question their immediate choices that they'll jump to and everything else. I've worked for state, like a lot of state policies, they have rules about inclusion. You need a diversity candidate in that room to basically make someone question. They'll have people that are proactively pushing the questions. Like, you can only ask the same questions to everybody. You know, you can't cater to the questions, everything else. So, but that was set at leadership. You know, I had a VP who was very much about inclusion and diversity and embracing change. If you're in a position where you have the ability to impact or question or challenge something, you should. It starts with you every day. So if you want to work in that industry and you notice everyone around you looks the exact same, ask yourself, is it really helping you? There's a lot of candidates that may be highly qualified and skilled, but if I go and I look and I interview and no one looks like me, I don't want to work there. So it's really something you have to ask yourself, because either you're going to be the first and you'll have to make the change, or you're there and you can impact change and they're already trending that way, but it's never going to be easy. You know, you can't just go in and do your job. You got to interact. It's all teamwork. But you got to ask yourself, what kind of company do you want to work for, and can you impact that?
Really good answer on it. Starts with the leadership. The last thing I'll add to that is when you join a company, find out what their core values are, and then during the interview process, turn it on the interviewee or the interviewer and ask them how they make sure that they walk the walk that they talk. What do they do to enforce their core values? And if they don't give you good answers, they're probably not enforcing it. Like I said, it starts from the top down, because the leaders are supposed to set the pace for those core values, and they're supposed to be enforced by people in talent. So you can do a little bit of research on your own by looking on websites like Glassdoor or something like that, and seeing if the company culture really does match the core values that they tout. And then you can determine whether or not it's a good fit for you.
So that's all the time that we have. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and a very big thank you to our awesome panelists for taking time to come speak with us.
Thank you.